Did Carnivore come before Bitcoin? What was it that caught your attention about Bitcoin, and when did you first start looking into it?
Yeah, so Carnivore came first. I was like very much down the health rabbit hole, and that was kind of my main focus because I had, a real problem that I had to fix. And so that sort of took all of my attention outside of work. And then Bitcoin came about through Carnivore, to be honest. So some of my Carnivore doctors that I was listening to started talking about Bitcoin.
No way.
And that was like sort of fascinating to me because I was like, what is this Bitcoin thing? This was in the last full bull run of 2021, I think, 2020, 2021. And so there was a lot more people starting to talk about it. And there was, another friend at work that had sort of mentioned it to me. So I reached out to him, and then I read Saifedean's book sort of immediately. And basically from the back end of reading that book, I was like, wow, this is important and big, and I'm hooked. And I started sort of getting excited about it then. But it did take some time to learn the difference between all the shit coins and Bitcoin. There was a period where I was like, these hardcore maxis, like, why are they so strong on Bitcoin only? Surely if crypto is going to be, a large part of the future, then surely there's going to be other interesting projects. And I was a bit confused, I guess, for the first maybe 3 to 6 months. But the more research I did, the more books I read. I read like, Jeff Booth's book. I've got half them here, Lynn Alden's book. I've just bought the Andrew Bailey book as well. So there's just, the more reading I did, the more podcasts I listened to, I then understood the difference. And it does take time because it's a big rabbit hole and it's deep and complex. I just became 100% solely focused on Bitcoin. And I'd bought some ETH to that point and I sold it all, which is the best thing I've ever done because ETH has been absolutely atrocious versus Bitcoin. So, yeah, 100% Bitcoin now. I guess the journey in Carnivore, I had to take a realization that I need to take responsibility and I need to do the research to work out how I improve my health. And I found out that the authorities in nutrition science and the authorities, say doctors, etc., really didn't know anything about nutrition. So the doctors didn't study nutrition. It's not their fault. They just weren't taught anything about nutrition. So that was a real realization that, wow, like I think nutrition is at the base of many health issues that we face today. And 95% of doctors have literally zero training on it. Zero, none. And so they've got busy lives and busy families and they're making good money doing what it is that they do. And there's many good things that they do, but they do not understand nutrition. And I thought that they did. I learnt that maybe you shouldn't trust some of these authorities for, full responsibility of your health, something that is as important as your health. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me getting sick because I actually did the work. I came out the other side 10 times healthier than I've ever been, and I feel better than I've ever felt. So I didn't only remove my headaches, but I literally got better health than I've ever had, and I wake up feeling better every day than I ever have in my life. So that really sort of flicked a switch in my head to say, why are they telling me that meat's bad for me, and when all I do is eat meat, I feel better and better and better? And so I then was looking into the incentives behind why are they telling us that, meat's bad for us when it's actually really good for us. And then you see that it's largely driven by money. So the incentives behind nutrition science is largely driven by processed food companies wanting to sell their boxed stuff, and they can make higher margins out of boxed things than they can make out of whole food things. And so there is all this apparatus around confusing people or suggesting that, the food pyramid is what you should follow. The bottom of the food pyramid was all processed food, largely. Like 90% of it, I think, was processed grains. And when I removed processed grains from my diet, I felt 1,000 times better. So it just showed me that it's an incentive problem. The incentive is for the food companies to pay the nutrition scientists to release studies that suggest meat bad, processed food good. And so I was like, holy hell, how do we have a situation where the government is backing the same narrative that these food companies are backing, and it's making people sick? And I was like blown away. And it just really sort of set me on a path of like looking at incentives and finding that the root of most evil in the world is generally around misaligned incentives. And that comes back to money. And so the money being the root of all the incentives that drive decisions at business levels, and why these large food companies have got so large, and why they, there's all sorts of malincentive in the nutrition science, and it all came back to money. So I then was like, well, hang on, why don't we look at the money? And started going down this sort of money path. And there was Austrian economists that were talking about the root of all evils being central banking, and central banking leads to, misincentives with business, etc. And so that all played very nicely into the kind of world that I'd stumbled into, seeing that there was maybe a problem with incentives, there was a problem with the money. Look at the money deeper. Why do we have money that they can print as much as they like, and sort of debase our hard-earned dollars? And that's sort of, obviously right up in the alley of Bitcoin, and why a fixed money makes so much sense. And then that can hopefully realign incentives better, so there's less challenges downstream from it. But yeah, that was a long way of saying Carnivore led to Bitcoin effectively, because I realized that the root of the problem was to do with money.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. It's quite crazy how these little dominoes start falling as it all just starts to make a bit more sense, doesn't it? You're like, hang on, no, I need to start questioning that. I need to start questioning that. And you dig a little deeper. I've often said that, I went to business school, ended up working as a broker in international shipping market. And you're just like, you're running after make money. But you don't ever stop and go, well, hang on, what is money? And I think you've just described exactly the same thing, right? You're literally in business banking and you're doing debt deals every single day.
No,
but actually,
no one in finance, and I, and including myself in this, I never thought about the question, what is money, until I read a Bitcoin book. Wow. So that led me to the path of asking those questions, and then listening to, say, Robert Breedlove's What is Money show, and then hearing Saylor talk through the history of, civilization that led up to the gold standard, etc. That is all learnt externally. It's the same with, if you go and see a great functional medical doctor, they might talk to you about your lifestyle. Jake, how's your eating habits? You might be like, well, I eat, processed junk all day. I eat McDonald's every night for dinner. They might say, well, we think that whole foods are probably healthier for you. That might be a better path to take. How are you sort of getting outside and being in nature? And you're like, no, I spend all my days under fluorescent lights at the office. They might be saying, okay, well, maybe you should get outside a bit more. Maybe think about, even looking at, say, meditation for, you've got stress, high stress levels, etc. Those functional medical doctors that have actually done the work to understand nutrition plays a part, lifestyle plays a part, time in nature plays a part. Maybe things like meditation might be good for stress levels, even things like saunas, ice baths, etc. They did not learn any of that at medical school, not one bit. They've learnt that from probably getting sick themselves and then having to find their own solution to find health. So all of the doctors that I follow and respect, without exception, I think, had health problems themselves, or they had health problems in their family. So it was someone that they loved and cared about, that got really unwell, and they had to go to the nth degree to do the research, to do the proof of work, to understand how they could heal them. Because when they were told by another doctor they just need to take a pill for the rest of their life, they asked the question, hang on, does that make sense? Do I think that that's the answer here? Why don't I do some research? And you'll find that all the functional medical doctors, all the best doctors, in my view, have been sick themselves and they've gone through, or they've had someone that they love get really sick and they've actually had to learn it themselves. And it's the same thing around banking and finance and learning about sound money. No one in finance is thinking about sound money because they're doing just fine. They're earning good salaries and they're, businesses are benefiting from the fractional reserve banking system, etc. And they are the top of their class out of whatever MBA school they did or whatever finance degree that they've done. And they've been having a successful career and everything is good. And it makes perfect sense that we have central banks to bail us out when there's a problem. That makes perfect sense to the average person when you say central banks are there to bail out the banks if there's any catastrophic problems. That sounds good. It sounds warm and fuzzy and it sounds nice and it sounds like, they're there to protect us. And so unless you happen to stumble down this rabbit hole, you're just not going to be asking those questions. So, I think like Jesse Myers says, the yuppie elite will be the last that adopt Bitcoin because they don't have to.